Hi, everyone. I'm Summer.
I'm Carrie.
And this is Popecia Podcast.
I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. It'll be fun. Fuck. Oh my God. What the hell just happened? What the hell? What is happening? Make sure you come back. We're going to do this bi-weekly. So make sure you come back to talk to us more about, sex, drugs, and self-improvement.
What are we talking about today?
So what we're talking about today is how fun families are. Yeah. So it's that time of year, between the November holiday and the December holidays and all this, there's like a bazillion fall holidays between all the different demographics that there's, tends to be family overload during this time of year. So I thought we should discuss families. So I don't even know where to start. Fucking hell. Seriously, y'all. So Carrie, what you want to jump in there? It's Brady Bunch at your house, right?
Do what?
It's Brady Bunch at your house, right?
Yeah.
Or the Waltons. It was the Waltons, right? That were like super saccharine. Okay.
I have a story I can start with. It just happened.
Oh.
Well, actually, over the last week.
I love stories.
God have been calling me so many times every day.
Who has?
My mom and my stepdad.
Okay.
I am not a phone talker.
Right.
Of it. They know that, and every time around this year, my mom starts feeling guilty about her not being here. So she always overdoes it and calls me all the time and texts messages me. And then she guilt trips me for not responding as much as she would like.
Because it's about her.
Yes. Always.
Okay. So
all of my family does that every year.
So for the audience, for context for them, Carrie was raised mostly by her grandparents.
Right.
So growing up, while you're living with your grandparents, did your mom do this then?
Yes, every year.
Okay, so this has been the ongoing pattern the whole time. Okay.
When I first got Facebook and social media and everything, she would send me messages on there and call me all the time, and it's not like I don't go see her. I can or call her when I can. I just don't like talking on the phone, and she knows that. But every year, the holidays make my family guilt trip me. Setting boundaries this year with them.
Yes, that's very important. Boundaries. Oh my God! If you do, you ever feeling exhausted from the constantly having to reinforce those boundaries with people who can't seem to make themselves respect fucking boundaries?
Yeah, I have such a hard time with it myself. I'm such a people pleaser. Such a people pleaser. So it's difficult for me to set the boundaries and maintain them myself. But this year has just been so much for me, and last year with COVID on top of some other stuff. So I have to, or I will go insane. My mother's already insane. But the holidays are just especially hard because everybody's it's family time and you have to be with your family and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I'm why can't I just try my best and exist?
Right. And that's one thing I want to say to people today. If you get nothing else out of this, at our big age, we are too goddamn grown to be carrying around the weight of everyone else's expectations. Yeah. If you need to not go to your families, then don't go. It's okay. If you prefer to have Friendsgiving or do Christmas with your friends, I've done Christmas with a friend before too, because that's a whole other issue. I'll tell that story in a minute, how my Christmas got screwed up. That's fine. Set boundaries that are healthy for you, and that you can go even further. You are not required to maintain relationships with abusive people just because you share DNA.
Yes. That is such
Or even if you don't share DNA. I know a lot of adoptive families that will try to guilt adoptees. You are not responsible for that. You don't have to maintain that relationship if they are being abusive to you or toxic. You have a right to protect yourself and do what you need to do.
And like another thing, people like, manipulation is a form of abuse that people don't think about. Like guilt tripping is a form of manipulation, and we all should know that, and we should all learn to see it when it's happening. Like it sucks when people do that, because we all think that we're not manipulatable. That's not a word, but it is now.
Well, and especially if you have the ability to empathize with people, and then they are leveraging that, right? And if you are one of these people who does this, it is not okay. It is harmful, and knock that shit off.
Yeah.
Don't make me use my mom voice on you people.
I've had to learn like those behaviors in myself. Like I don't like realize that I'm doing it.
Right.
Point it out and I'm like, oh shit, you're right. Like I do that and work on it. But like a lot of like families can't do that. Because
Right.
very like, especially like my grandparents are getting older, so they're very focused on like who's gonna take care of me and my stuff when I can't do it anymore. And my mom and my stepdad are very focused on like, we don't have anyone else like around us. Like who are we gonna talk to? Like who's gonna take care of our stuff if something happens? Like
that sounds like the consequences of your own fucking decisions.
Like
you know,
like families are really good at pushing you away and then trying to pull you back forcefully and aggressively.
Oh my god. I get whiplash.
Same. Like
yes.
The emotional whiplash and like learning to understand like the thinking errors of what my family is doing and what I've been doing is so hard.
It is, because when our family of origin is like that, it's normalized to us, right? Like we're conditioned to think, and so it takes a lot of work to even start recognizing those patterns in yourself, and then even more to get rid of them, because then we have to learn all the skills that we should have learned as children had they done their job. Oh, this conversation is a very big point of contention with my parents, okay? Because they're like, you're saying we failed as parents. I'm like, I'm not saying that exactly.
No, like,
I'm just saying, in the most neutral, non-judgmental tone that I can, that I recognize that I grew up with some deficiencies that I had to correct in myself.
Like, at least you can admit it and recognize it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Work on it. You've like, from the stories that you've told me, I can see like how much work you've done. Oh my God. I think it's amazing. Most people would not put in that much effort.
And it's crazy. I'm trying to not use that term anymore, because some people, yeah, it's not the most appropriate verbiage, right? It was really strange because I was doing that work on myself. I had not done the work before I had kids, but my kids were very little when I was learning this stuff about myself and started working on my trauma. And so because I already had kids, I was like super motivated, like, okay, I've got to fix this shit because I cannot do this to them, right?
Right.
And my parents took it very personally that I was raising my children differently than they had raised us. And so we had some conversations, and I lost count of the number of times I was told to leave my parents' house and never, ever come back. Yeah. Now, fortunately, my dad at least will sit there and think about things, and he has made a lot of growth and improvement over those years. But yeah, it was a very bumpy road for a long, long time. And we still have some issues, like the last two Christmases. So Christmas and the holiday in November, we really isn't really a big celebration about those holidays for us, but basically my family uses every long weekend in existence to all get together and eat too damn much, because apparently we celebrate gluttony. And so, but Christmas was always the big one, because my grandmother, who helped raise me, it was just her favorite. And so it was always a big deal. And it was always also the holiday where a lot of times some of her siblings might show up. Like she was one of 11 kids, right? And they were scattered all over from California to Florida. And so, but Christmas was the time where usually at least one or two of them would just surprise show up, right?
Right.
So that was always a big deal. So every year for my entire life, well, before that too, but we have our celebration on Christmas Eve, the 24th, at my grandparents' house. The last two Christmases, I did not get to spend Christmas with all of my children. And that is because my parents' other daughter, the first one, I don't know how much of it was her being intentionally malicious, and the second definitely was. So I don't know if the first one really was, she masterminded it that way, or if it just kind of happened and she saw the impact and decided if she wanted to repeat the next year. I don't know. So for many years, and you notice I do not call her my sister. She left the family many years ago. She literally said those words, "I'm leaving this family." She has said she's ashamed of us. She pretends she's not Choctaw to most people. She has said lots of racist things. She's not allowed around my children, very minimally, for these reasons. So she hasn't been a part of my life in many, many years. Several years ago, when I really cut off all communication, was several years ago. My grandfather was in the hospital. They called the family in. He's, thinking he was going to die. And she refused to come see him, even though that was his request. Okay, fine. She was living in Pennsylvania at the time. Fine, whatever. Now, mind you, she's never done anything with her life. She's no education, no job, never worked. And so she doesn't have anything preventing her from coming. Her husband makes a lot of money, so they had the finances for her to come. She just didn't want to come. And she told me over the phone, because I was the one having to call relatives, giving information. If it was our grandmother, I would come, but since it's just him, I'm not going to. Okay, kind of hateful, but sure, if that's what you want to do. And then she says, but when he dies, I'm going to need y'all to hold off on the funeral for a few days to make sure I can get there. Bitch, what?
No. That's not.
I was in the what I call the bad news room, the little room at the end of each hallway in the hospital where they take you to counsel, which they never take you in there unless it's bad news. That's why I call you that. So I was in there talking on the phone, and as she said this, I saw my parents start walking by, and so this hand just comes out of the room. I guess I just handed it to my mother, and I said, your daughter needs to talk to you because I'm done.
Yeah.
And I was done with her at that point. And I affectionately call her Hydra. And if you are familiar with mythology, you'll get that. And if not, you can Google it. I think it's a very fitting description. So in any event, 2 years ago, they moved back into Oklahoma for the first time in like, I don't know, years and years, over 10 years. Probably more. Well, yeah, definitely more, like 18 maybe. Anyways, doesn't matter. So my parents had always thought, well, she doesn't show up when they need help. She doesn't always show up for holidays, family stuff. And they'd always made excuses for her. Well, she lives out of state. Well, sometimes she only lived really, several hours away in Texas, but they were taking trips to do other stuff. So it's a priority thing. But they would make excuses for it. Well, she doesn't live close. So she moved back into the state and lived only about 3 hours from them at that point, which was closer than I lived at that time. And so the first weekend they are here, my parents drive up to see them. Okay, fine. I don't have a problem with that. But the thing was, I was having an event. I was having a fashion show. I was some of my creations were being featured in a fashion show, and I invited them to come up for that. Well, they couldn't come for that, but they could go to her house. And I'm like, it's just 20 minutes difference. Like y'all could come see the show and go. No, they don't want to do that. Okay, fine. Whatever. Didn't really my my parents in the 10 years that I was had been living up around OKC at that time, they had only come to see me twice in those 10 years. My law school graduation and the time that the city council of Norman gave me the Human Rights Award. Those were the only 2 times my parents had come up there. Both times, my mother acted a fool. I don't know why. She went out of her way to make things miserable and spend as little time with me as possible. It was bizarre. So honestly, I didn't hurt my feelings. They weren't coming up any more often because it's like, wow, that was something. But so then we're all together for Thanksgiving. And now, she had asked me if we could reschedule Christmas because my uncle had to have it rescheduled, she said. Apparently, we deduced later that she told him the opposite, that it needed to be rescheduled because I needed it rescheduled and I couldn't be there if it wasn't. So we all agreed to reschedule it, which really did bother me because it meant I wasn't going to get to be with all of my kids. Yeah. Because we plan everything around that Christmas Eve, around the December 24th. Like my custody and visitation orders are set up around that. I plan my work schedule around it. My grown kids plan their work schedule around it. It's always been set in stone. So we rescheduled. I'm like, okay, I'll take the hit on that to make sure that he can be here because, his parents, this was we just lost both of his parents. So, we're talking like this is probably the last Christmas we're going to have them all. And it was. So did that. At Thanksgiving, she announces in front of everyone, in front of my children, that the reason Christmas rescheduled was because she is going to Hydra's house to spend Christmas morning with my grandbabies because I've never got to do that before. My kids were crushed.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck says that in front of children? It was, yeah. So that was bad enough. And so my kids were already upset because she went up there just a couple weeks before. And then, so this was all within a month's time, right? So she went to see them the first week they're there, when she's only come to see my kid, and seen my kids at home twice in a decade. Then they go up a month later and manipulate and reschedule all of our Christmas around that. And that meant we couldn't all spend Christmas together because of that. Okay, fine. Discuss that with Dad. I'm like, I'm not playing with them. I'm just not going to do this, So then the next year, this past year, Christmas needs to get rescheduled again. Okay. We're going to schedule it to, I think it was scheduled to Christmas Day this time or the day after, something like that. So it wasn't as far off, but this time it was approached to me from my uncle's wife. Okay, if that's what y'all need to do, we'll do it that way because you need it. And, like I said, we had already lost their dad, my grandpa. My grandmother was not doing well. And they were having to go travel 2.5 hours every week to go see her and take care of her. And it was a whole thing. So I was like, okay, if we need to reschedule, I'll reschedule. So then come to find out, once we get there, the reason for the reschedule was Hydra had called them and requested it and said they could not be there if it wasn't rescheduled. And that they had talked to everybody and everybody agreed to it. And I told her, I'm like, no, okay, first of all, nobody talked to me. I was informed after the fact, after the decision was made. And then of course, my uncle's wife is hurt because she's like, why aren't your kids here? I said, because we plan around the 24th. Our entire lives are structured around being here that date. You can't change it without some of them not going to be able to be here. And she had led everyone to believe that she needed it rescheduled because her husband wasn't going to be home. He was going to be off at work because he travels for work, which, first of all, I'm not sure why that should reschedule our family Christmas, because he's not our family. But even so I asked him, and I could tell he was acting very nervous and shifty. So he knew what had happened. Because I asked him, I said, you just get back in from traveling? He's like, no, I was home. I'm like, okay. So why do we have to reschedule? He says, I don't know. I just do what I'm told. Oh, grow a pair. But anyways, so then Hydra has to announce in front of my children who do get to make it there that all they did on Christmas Eve, all they did that day was sit on the couch and eat popcorn and watch movies. So there was nothing they needed to do. So then my kids know this. And then somehow the sidewall on her tire got magically slashed. I don't know what happened because I was not there. I swear to God, it was not me. I was in the house. I have witnesses. But somehow that happened. So, yeah. So anyhow, families can really suck. Okay, y'all? And it's okay to recognize that. And it's okay to set those boundaries and discontinue that. I will say my family does still try to force me to be in the same room with her. I have no problem pretending she doesn't exist when she is standing 3 inches from me. Because I have nothing. I don't hate her. I don't put that kind of energy into her. Yeah. She's just been a non-issue in my life for so many years that it doesn't matter. She doesn't mean anything. When people ask me if I have siblings, I really forget. And I have answered no. And then been like, oh, well, this is awkward when I remember. And so then you're like, okay, do I correct that or do I just let it?
Just let it. Fine.
Yeah, I usually just let it go and hope they never
ask you.
Listen to this. Yeah, so I don't know. I'll let y'all know how it goes after this because supposedly she's going to be there for, I don't know, soon. I don't know. Nobody tells me all the information, but apparently she's going to be at one of the family gatherings at some point, but not the other. I don't know.
That's how my family never celebrates anything on the actual holiday itself.
Mm-hmm.
We always just pick a day and we all meet up that day. But my aunt always throws a bitch fit because my oldest aunt, who is bananas.
Oh no.
The absolute bananas. Everything has to be scheduled around her or she's not going. If she's not the one cooking, she doesn't want to be there. If she can't have it scheduled the way she wants it, we're not doing it. Like,
yeah, those people who need everything centered around them, they need to be the center of attention, can be particularly exhausting.
It's so much, like, energy wise. Like, I've had to block her. I've blocked her and her husband on Facebook and my cousin because I can't deal with them. For holidays, I actively try to be there on the days they're not going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I have to set that boundary with myself. Otherwise, like, my whole entire holiday will be miserable and awful. And I really just want people to know, like, that's okay. Like, if there's people that are draining you and make life miserable, just schedule your time around when you don't have to see them, or, like, tell them, like, hey, I don't like being around you. We're just gonna have to avoid each other. Like, that's okay to say. I have to tell people that all the time. Like, I'm not the best at, like, speaking up for myself and telling people things like that, but, like, I will still actively try my best to avoid those kinds of situations, at least.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay to not go to those family gatherings if you need to.
Yeah.
You know, go see grandma and grandpa the day before, the day after, if you need to, something like that. It doesn't have to be.
Or, like Summer said, spend your holidays with your friends, like the family you pick. Like, it's so much easier having, like, Friendsgiving or Christmas with your friends is so much more fun, and usually, like, no drama. Like, no drama. Everybody just potluck it.
And can we say something about the expectations? Okay, why the fuck do people keep serving shit they don't even like because they think that's what you're supposed to eat on these holidays? Seriously. Right. Like, we stopped doing that whole thing. Like, for Christmas, we just pick a genre of food and go with it. Like, you know, we might have Mexican food one year and Italian food the next year. Because we spent years my grandmother insisting that we cook the damn turkey and ham that nobody really wanted to eat. Because that's what you're supposed to do. I don't care what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to enjoy yourself. That's what you're supposed to do.
My family, like, really enjoys, like, the ham and the dressing and the mashed potato. Like, we do, like, the whole big spread, but it's because we all thoroughly enjoy it.
Right.
Then when I go to, like, my friend's thing, like, turkey day or whatever, one year they had enchiladas and Chinese food and sushi. And I was like, this is bomb. Like, why am I not doing this? I
just want chips and queso. That's all I really care about right now. I'm hungry.
And I'm still thinking about that.
Oh, good. That sounds so good. Anyhow, that's our spiel.
Back to the boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries. That is the message for you today, guys. Have those boundaries. Set those boundaries. And your boundaries are not negotiable. Anytime somebody tries to talk you out of them, they are violating your boundaries and your consent. Don't renegotiate those.
Yeah, like, absolutely not. Like, once you set those boundaries, like, stick to them, even if it's hard. Like, there's going to be people that tell you, like, well, if this is how it's going to be, like, I'm just not going to be in your life. And be like, cool, bye. Like,
great. Yes, because what they are actually saying to you is, if you are not going to allow me to continue to abuse you,
yeah,
I will not be in your life. Does that really sound like they're taking something away from you?
Like, fine. No. Oh, be gone, Satan. Like, I don't need you in my life.
Now, don't blame Lucy for these things.
He's always the scapegoat, you know? Like, but, like, for real, like, those people don't add anything to your life, just bad energy, bad vibes, like, low self-esteem, like, on their part, because they have to violate your consent and boundaries to make themselves feel better. Like, that's so shitty. Like, get the fuck out.
Right. And, you know, they may have, here's the problem that a lot of people with an abundance of empathy have is
Mhm.
that we can understand how they got that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I understand how my parents got to be the way they are and why they treated us in certain ways growing up. What you can't do is take that too far and let it excuse their behavior.
Right.
Understanding it's great, but it cannot become an excuse for their behavior where you're letting them continue to mistreat you. Because in the end, their behavior is still their responsibility. And they need to take responsibility for that. And natural consequences is when you mistreat people, they don't want to be around you.
Yeah.
And so if you don't want to be around them, don't be around them. It's fine. I give you that permission if you needed it.
Like I work with teens and like younger kids, and I spend most of my time telling them like what consent is and telling them like if you don't want to hug somebody and they're trying to force you to hug somebody, you can say no. And if they don't respect that, like they're not a safe person to be around. And constantly talking about like boundaries and being able to set them for themselves. Like I have a bunch of teenagers who like when they're angry, like they just don't want to be messed with, they don't want to be talked to, they just want to be by themselves. And then there's staff that want to constantly be on top of them and constantly trying to figure it out. And I'm just like, no. Like they set this boundary with us, like let them have their time. Like that's okay. And I think people forget that it's okay to reinforce their own boundaries with people. Like if somebody makes like a mistake of a boundary, like they didn't know that's what it was, or it's like a misunderstanding, that's one thing. And reinforcing it with that person is invaluable. But like setting those boundaries and them understanding it and still crossing it, like you got to draw that line and kick them out of your life. Like that's or spend less time on that thing.
And it is really difficult if you were raised without being allowed healthy boundaries to learn how to reinforce those, especially in dealing with your family of origin, because you get kind of regress a little bit when you're around your family, right? Like you still feel like that vulnerable child.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. You got to work through that. Therapy can be helpful. But also sometimes that distance is necessary in order to work through that and then come back when you are able to set those boundaries for yourself. Because
Absolutely.
your own health can depend on it.
Absolutely.